Welcome into a special Big Ten tournament edition of the Big Ten Hockey Report. Rick Pizzo alongside Paul Caponigri. And as 6 teams get set to head to St. Paul for this year's event, Paul, the only thing that we truly know is that Michigan is going to get a bid one way or the other, whether it's an at-large or the auto bid that comes along with the conference title.
Yeah, and the way the year has gone for all teams, other than that, there's a lot of unknowns. Some teams have hit their highs now. Some had them earlier in the season. But when it comes to this weekend, it's one game at a time, and anything can happen. Even
though Michigan didn't win the Big Ten regular season, Minnesota got the number 1 seed. The Wolverines are top 7 in the pairwise. Yeah. They're going to get an at-large regardless, and a big reason why the play of freshman Kyle Connor, who earlier this week was named not just the Freshman of the Year, but the Big Ten Player of the Year, had 42 points, 22 goals in Big Ten play. He finished with 30-plus goals this year. First freshman anywhere in the nation to do that since Thomas Vanek in the early 2000s at Minnesota. Just an absolutely unbelievable year for Connor, and he is not alone because, as you can see from other nominees in the All-Big Ten first team, it was heavy, maize, and blue. Connor joined by his line mates, JT Compher and Tyler Mott, as well as outstanding D-man Zach Werenski. Josh Shealy had a great year on the blue line for Ohio State, and Minnesota freshman Eric Shearhorn, a first-team All-Big Tenner and your Big Ten goalie of the year. What else can you say about Kyle Connor, Paul? He had the skills coming in. He knew how to find the back of the net. But over the course of the year, you also saw his game evolve. He's more than just a scorer.
Yeah, and he even spoke about it, playing a full ice game, 200 feet. And I think a lot of that had to do with Tyler Mott and watching the way he plays the game, watching one of his line mates, and actually just getting on that train. And he's learned that I can play defense and I can still produce on the offensive end. And, I mean, what can you say? You saw all those things. He's also probably the favorite for the Hobie Baker as the top player in the whole country. And to be able to do it as an 18-year-old consistently, every game, every weekend, it's just been really fun to watch.
No one could have ever predicted that after Dylan Larkin left last year, after his freshman year in Ann Arbor, and now doing great things with the Detroit Red Wings, that his replacement, if you will, may have an even better year at year's end than Larkin had a year ago. Of course, the tournament is still to be played, and Michigan is the number 2 seed. Minnesota is the 1. Those 2 teams wait until Friday to get things underway. Your very first quarterfinal will be Penn State and Wisconsin. That's the 3-6 matchup. 5 o'clock Eastern time at the Xcel Energy Center. Ohio State and Michigan State to follow. And of course, you can see all these games right here on BTN. Paul, let's start with that first semifinal, Penn State and Wisconsin. 2 weeks ago, you would have said the Nittany Lions are big-time heavy favorites, but they were just throttled during the last weekend of the regular season against Michigan, while Wisconsin split played very well against Minnesota.
Yeah, it's amazing how things have changed since the last time we were in here. And Penn State, you know, along with their goaltending now has been a thing for me. Even McAdam has been removed from a game the last 3 times, as much right after Godowski had proclaimed him as kind of the number 1 guy. And then you lose your second team, all-league, all-freshman Vince Pedri on the back end. I don't believe he's going to be back this weekend. It does bring in some questions on the Penn State side. And then also Wisconsin. I was just there on Saturday night at Mariucci, and they gave Minnesota everything they could handle, and they've won 2 of their last 3. So they finally have a couple wins. That feeling, and talking to Coach Eves about that, is getting some of those young guys, so that winning feeling has really kind of changed them. So I think it's not a gimme, and we've seen in the past there's been upsets. It's kind of funny,
Always.
And it's come quick full circle. Penn State's on the other side of that now. They've slowly moved up in the rankings. Now they're the favorite. It'll be interesting to see how they react to that.
Godowski did say on Tuesday that he's sticking with Eamon McAdam. He will get the start on Thursday against Wisconsin. Second semifinal, a complete and total contrast in styles. Ohio State and Michigan State. The Buckeyes right now playing as well as you could make an argument any team in the Big Ten over the past 6-7 games, scoring goals in bunches. And while it's been a hugely disappointing year for Michigan State, they still have Jake Hildebrand, who on any given night can certainly steal a game.
He does, and it's going to be interesting. And the fact that they just played last weekend is going to be interesting. They had a big, high-scoring game Friday, and then a tight, low-scoring game, 1-1, that went into shootout on Saturday. Ohio State's been on fire. They're 5-0-2 in their last 7 games. You can't really ask for much more than that. They've beaten some quality opponents. They swept Michigan 2 weeks ago. And they're scoring a lot of goals. Nick Schilke has kind of led the way in that, but they're getting it all throughout their lineup as well, which helps. And then Christian Fry, he's in the net. He has the experience. He has probably the most experience other than Jake Hildebrand, but he's gone the furthest in the tournament and won 3. They're 3-2 in the 2 years of playing in the Big Ten tournament. So those things against that veteran lineup, we talked about them all year. This is their last go-around for those seniors at Michigan State. It'll be interesting to see how Jake Hildebrand and all those veteran players react.
No doubt. Fry was the biggest reason why Ohio State in the inaugural Big Ten tournament was one overtime goal away from stealing the auto bid. The winner of that game between the Buckeyes and Spartans will then move on to play the top seed, Minnesota, who once again takes the regular season title. You could make an argument, though, that it's a tougher draw, especially if it is Ohio State.
Sure.
Do either one of those teams, Ohio State or Michigan State, pose a serious issue for Minnesota on Friday night?
Oh, absolutely. I think either one of them could. You've seen Minnesota has just been not consistent enough in their game. They've split with Michigan State a couple weeks ago. 3 of the 4 games against Ohio State went to overtime. The other one was a 1-goal game.
They did win all 4, though. That's important to point out.
And the other important thing to point out about that is it's very difficult to beat a team 5 times in a year. Plus, you got a team that's coming in playing well. I think Minnesota obviously will be the favorite, but at this point, it certainly would not surprise me if MSU or Ohio State were able to upset them.
As for Michigan, Minnesota may be the favorite in that game. The Wolverines are no question the favorite to win this tournament because of what they have done over the course of the season.
Doubt.
Do you see a way that Michigan on Saturday night is not, for any reason, holding up the tournament championship trophy?
I mean, very much so, because their 2 toughest opponents in the Big Ten League were Ohio State and Minnesota. Whereas if Minnesota and Ohio State end up playing in that semifinal, that guarantees them one of them will be playing against Michigan in the final. And I think those are the 2 teams have the highest probability of upsetting Michigan. There's a lot of variables, though. Michigan hasn't had the consistent back end with the defense and the goaltending. They've given up a lot of goals. And in those 1-game formats, you just never know. Strange things can happen. But Michigan's the favorite. I think
but
it sets up.
But doesn't Red Berenson have to be feeling so good about his team? They just beat Penn State 13-2 combined over the past 2 games.
Well, you know Red Berenson. You spoke to him. He'll go back to the Ohio State game and say, hey, we gave up too many goals. And I like the way our defense and goaltending was. He wouldn't even have talked about the goals that we scored this last weekend, scoring 13. Talk about the fact that he only gave up 1 each game, and that's by far the key in this tournament and in the future tournament for them to have success. It's the back end and the goaltending to be solid. Doesn't have to be as good as their offense, just has to be solid.
Of course, all 5 games of the 2016 Big Ten tournament from the Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul can only be seen right here on BTN. Enjoy the tournament. For Paul Caponigri, I'm Rick Pizzo as we say goodbye to this edition and potentially this season of the Big Ten Hockey Report.